I would love to hear more of these stories about times when patients have made connections, made a powerful moment, had a powerful moment with you, with the music, with making music, anything like that.
Yeah,
What you
absolutely.
do.
I can tell you one that's really very vivid because it just happened, I think, on Monday or Tuesday. So I had received a referral for a patient who was in an assisted living facility. And I attempted to contact the family before going to visit and wasn't able to get in touch with them. But I knew based on some of the clinical notes that were given to me and the referral that this person was in what we call a period of transition. When we're thinking of somebody's transition, we're thinking of a series of signs and symptoms that tell a practitioner, that this person is approaching the active end of their life. So you may notice that somebody's responses are really minimal. You may notice, for some people, a rattling in their chest or in their esophagus. Things that, although to the outside eye may seem really uncomfortable, are actually not very uncomfortable to the person, especially when their pain is mitigated and when they are appropriately medicated. So I had an idea of what to expect walking into the room, knowing that this patient was in the transition or active dying process. And that if we were thinking of a timetable, it was really important for me to get out there sooner rather than later. So I arrive and I walk in the door and I knock on the door, and immediately I see the patient who's sitting up in bed, very much in the active dying process. I'm noticing a changing of color on the patient's feet. I'm seeing sitting with their mouth slightly opened, their eyes closed, looking very comfortable, but I'm really happy that I got there at that moment. And I walk in and I introduce myself to their healthcare aide. I introduce myself to the patient, and I notice sitting next to him is his wife. And I don't know anything about his wife in this moment. I have not spoken to her. I don't know anything about her. And I quickly learn, after asking her some questions and introducing myself, that it seems that she may also have a slight dementia diagnosis. And through my experience and through working with other individuals, as well as looking at some clinical notes, then I was able to notice, okay, I really need to assess what the need is in this situation, because I can sit here and I can play music and pretend everything is, but clearly things are not fine right now. And so I'm going to need to really adjust what my focus was. And in that moment, I said, okay, I need to engage with his wife. This is not for him anymore. This is for his wife's ability to process what is happening, even when she may be confused, when she's feeling an abundance of intense emotion, as anybody would with the loss of a partner. I then learned that they were together for 35 years, and she told me all about their first date. And okay, great, this is good information for me to have. And so I immediately start thinking to myself, as she's talking, I'm processing, I'm going through I call my inner jukebox of, okay, what music do I have on hand right now that I can pull together? And she says, my husband, during our first date, we were on a ski trip in college, and he stood up in front of everybody and grabbed his guitar and sang a folk song from the 60s and 70s. And I said, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Do you remember what song it was? And she says, no. And I say, the good news is you and I have the same taste in music because I also love the 60s and 70s. So let's pick something. And so I start playing Leavin' on a Jet Plane, which has been done multiple times. I think it was originally John Denver and then Peter, Paul, and Mary. There's a couple renditions. And I want to really call attention to the choice of that song, because Leavin' on a Jet Plane is essentially, the theme of the song is that the person is leaving on a jet plane, right? They're going on a trip and they're hoping that they may be able to come back, but they know that they will not be able to come back. And in my mind, that's my job, right? I think about, okay, if I'm going to bring a song into the space, what is it going to hold meaning for in not just that person's personal experience, but in the actual intricacies of music? And so we start singing it. I invite her to sing with me. She absolutely does. And she's holding her husband's hand. Now, her husband has not demonstrated any clear outward signs of physical movement, no squeezing of the hand, no moving of the feet. And what we do know is that the last sense to leave our bodies in the dying process is the sense of sound, right? We can hear so much longer than people typically even realize. It's the first sense to develop. It's the last sense to go. And so she's singing, I'm singing, she's holding her husband's hand, and she jolts for a second. And she looks down at his hand and she goes, he squeezed my hand with just 2 of his fingers. And I said, yeah, that's because he can hear you. And he heard everything that you said about your first date. And I bet that he remembers that exact moment of standing up in front of all of your friends and singing that song to you. And she looks back at me and she says, that song is one of the songs he would sing to me all the time. And now that's information I didn't know. I'm not a superhuman. I don't read minds or anything. And it wasn't really about whether that was a relevant song or not. We knew it would be relevant because of the theme of the music. And so when we zoom out a little bit and we say, okay, it's beautiful qualitative information that we have, of course, but what are we really looking at? When we synthesize what happened in that moment, what really was it? And the goals that I was trying to achieve in that space were A, emotional processing for his wife, being able to have a space for her to really reminisce about what their life was like together in a small way, but in a very meaningful way. And to be able to have a container that could hold something that feels so big. And when we think about grief and we think about loss and we think about the processing of the death of somebody that we care about, it is incredibly overwhelming. And what the music can do when done well and when done clinically is hold the space to make it a little bit lighter. I always say it's like you add a blanket in the room. You can just sit back for a second and feel what you need to feel. And then on the other side of that, what we can do afterwards is look at the health outcomes for his wife, right? In the immediate bereavement period following that patient's death, what is the impact of those moments? And when there are multiple moments where somebody can feel interconnected to the person that they care about, when there are moments that they can feel that they have processed an emotion that has come up for them, both positive, negative, neutral, happy, sad, all in the same hand. And then how does that affect their bereavement status too? What does it really look like to provide opportunities for that person? And that was just a moment that I totally will never forget.